Hello and welcome back to Business Analytics. This is Hari Rajagopalan and we'll continue time series forecasting. In this lecture, we're going to talk about trend-based time series forecasting. So we finished descriptive analytics, we're squarely in predictive analytics, and we're talking about trend-focused forecasting methods. So when we forecast with trend is long-term increase or decrease. We're talking about more than 1 year, and it's a net influence of long-term factors, and we have to ignore minor fluctuations. So we're going to use a method called double moving average. Remember, we talked about simple moving average, but in double moving average, we applied moving average technique twice. Once to the original data, and then second time to the single moving average. Best used for data with trend but no seasonality. And the other method we are going to use is double exponential smoothing or Holts method. And we use exponential smoothing to update both level and trend. So the smoothing factors are alpha and beta here, but in this case, beta goes to trend and not seasonality. All right, so let's look at an example problem. Here is a company called Watercraft Incorporated, which makes personal watercrafts or jet skis. And so here in 5 years, it's enjoyed steady growth in sales, and they are looking for the next year, and they want to use 5 years of data. So here is the data and sales in dollars, right? 2012 to 2016, and we are trying to predict the 2017 forecast. So when we plot this, you can kind of see there is definitely a trend here. There is also, you can see seasonality, but we're not going to focus on that. We're just going to focus on trend. And if we break it year by year, this is 2012 data. This is 2013, slightly up. 2014, more. Again, positive trend. 2015, more. And 2016. So unlike the previous set in seasonality where it was up and down, it clearly we can see it's going up. And definitely there is a trend here. There's also some seasonality, but we won't really look at it. Clearly, third quarter, it's going up in fourth quarter, whereas the second quarter it goes down. But since we are going to focus on trend, we are not going to look at that. So double moving average, just like single moving average, we look at number of periods, 2 period, 3 period, 4 period moving average. So step one, we find the moving average, and K is the number of periods. So we find the kth period, take average value for K periods. And then step two, we use the moving average and then take the double moving average of these moving averages. And I'll show it to you in Excel. So here are the 5 steps you've got to kind of follow, right? So that's step 3, you calculate level, you calculate trend, there's a formula, and then you calculate the forecast. So let's do this in Excel, and so I can walk you through step by step of this process. So before we get into Excel, let's take the example instead of K period. Let's look at a 4 period moving average. And again, I've kind of converted these 4 or 5 steps into how you're going to do the 4 period moving average, right? And so here are some examples we can walk you through. I'm not going to read through each one of them. You can open up the PowerPoint slide and read through it step by step. And then here is the final example of forecast at time period 8 or 23. We'll talk about that, okay? So let's focus on Excel and make sure that we actually are able to do this. But before we do that, so the first step is to get the moving average. So this is the average of the first 4. Notice that unlike your simple moving average, where the forecast of, if let's say you did a 4 period moving average, would be in the 5th time period, this one stays in the same time period because this is not the forecast. The forecast is right here. So this one, in time period 4, you're taking the moving average of 4 time periods, right? And then you're going to take 4 moving averages and then calculate the double moving average, which will then, so let me show you the next step. So that's the average, and then you get the double moving average. Notice it is in the same time period, unlike the simple moving average, which is always in the next time period. Then you're going to use moving average and double moving average and calculate level, right? And then you're going to calculate trend using moving average and double moving average. And then using level and trend, you're going to calculate the forecast, right? So remember that these forecasts at the bottom use only these values, and they have some special formulas to work with, okay? So I wanted to kind of show you that, for example, here, this is third time period, so that's why trend is multiplied 3 times. All right, so now we're in Excel, and I did want to kind of very quickly go over getting these yearly graphs, because they're very important. The first thing you need to do with data sets is to look at that yearly graph. Okay, so let's go here, right click, format axis, and let's say minimum is 1, maximum is 4 in this case because it has 4 time periods, major unit is 1. And so here's what we have. This is the 2012 data, right? So I'm actually going to edit and say series 2012, and then I'm going to add other data. 2013 is right here. 2014 is right here, and you can kind of do that for 2015 and 2016. The point is you will be then able to actually analyze both trend and seasonality a lot better than this kind of a data set, which kind of goes all the way up like this, right? And remember, as we are doing the forecast, it is also important that you do the upper and lower level confidence intervals like I've showed you how to do before. So in Excel, we do the same thing. The first 4, we actually look at the average, as you can see here, right? Remember, unlike simple moving average, where we actually start at time period 5, we are going to look at time period 4 and take the average. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, and at time period 7, we get the double moving average. And then level, you use this formula, 2 times moving average minus double moving average. So level here, if you double click, 2 times your moving average minus the double moving average for the same time period. So don't change the time period there. Trend is 2 times moving average minus, and then you divide it by the number of periods minus 1. So there we go. The number of periods is 4 here, number of seasons, so it's 4 minus 1, and you use the same formula. And then forecast, remember the final forecast is for the next time period. You're going to use that. And then when you come here to the forecast, remember this trend has to be multiplied by the number of time periods. So in the first time period after this, you multiply it by 1. Next time you're going to multiply it by 2 because you're 2 trends away, 2 time periods away. Here you're going to do 3, right? I'm not going to get into how to calculate MSE or RMSE because you've already done it. And here's a good example on how you can do that. So with this, we finish double moving average, and here is our actual forecast. And you'll notice the seasonality, all the up and down stuff is smoothened out, and all you see is one straight linear line, which shows us the trend. So that's the advantage of this double moving average forecast. So we are now going to look at the Holts method, which is going to look at for the same data set. And we're going to see how we're going to do Holts method. So we have, this is also called double exponential smoothing. So the first initialization, you've got to do an initialization where we are going to actually assume the trend is 0. Alpha and beta both give it a single value like 10% or 50% or 90%. I prefer starting low because alpha, the smoothing factor, should be low. And then here are the formulas for calculations. Again, remember what alpha and beta mean. It's the percentage of new data you are using to update your trend or your level or your trend. Okay, and these are some examples here. I'm going to actually show you how to do it in Excel. So I have taken all the math formulas and try to explain this in English at the best I can. So level at time period 2 is calculated by alpha multiplied by actual at time period 2 plus 1 minus alpha. And then you look at the previous time period's level and the trend. So level plus trend from the previous time period. And here is the actual data here, right? Same thing, beta is how you use beta to calculate the trend. And then for forecast, again, you have an example here. So again, here, if you look at it, base level is the first time period is all set. Trend is 0. Base level is equal to the actual sales. You're assuming trend is 0. That's your initialization. And then your predicted sales is this plus this, right? Then again, these come from these two bottom values, okay? So let's go to Excel again and just walk through the formulas so you have an understanding of how this is beat down. Okay, so remember we start with a certain values of alpha and beta. So maybe 10% here, and we'll have to optimize it, right? You also could be asked to create confidence intervals, which would then be used based on the MAD, right? You're going to look at your predicted sales plus norm.s.inv, your probability. If you want 95% confidence, you'll use 2.5%. And I'm going through this fast because I'm assuming you have listened to the previous sessions and you know what I'm talking about right now. Similarly, this would be, if you look at this, this is also going to be your forecast plus norm.s.inv. And now, because it's 95%, you're going to use 0.975 multiplied by 1.25 times your MAD, right? And you will now be able to, and your MAD should be an F4, should not change. So let's go ahead and put that in, whereas you can copy the rest of it all the way down. And this here, we can go to chart, select data, and add LCL. And we can add UCL. And you can see there is a problem because it's all flat. So let's see what's going on here. First thing you got to do is go to formulas and say calculate sheet, and there you go. That fixes the problem, and it's recalculated. You can see that your upper control and lower control limits have been established. I like to use black and with dots for these control limits. So here is how you kind of, and I like to use the same data series, the dots. We can change that also. So you can go click here and you can go to the marker and select the same markers instead of changing the markers. And there we go. So that gives you your control prediction levels. That is, and you can see the actual sales is well within the prediction levels, 2 prediction levels. But let's talk about how to actually calculate these predicted sales. So remember, we start off base level and trend is 0, always the same. And then your first forecast is the sum of these two. That's okay. So this is the same. This would be alpha multiplied by your actual sales plus 1 minus alpha multiplied by the previous forecast, which is essentially this plus this. So what we are saying is we're taking 10% of the new sales and we are adjusting the old forecast with the new actual data, right? Similarly, trend trend would be beta, and then it would be beta, and it'll be the difference between your current level and your previous level. So your current level is E4 and your previous level is E3. So the difference between the two levels is your new trend, and this is your old trend. That's 1 minus beta. And once you have that, you copy it all the way down here. Once you get to this spot, you'll have to change the formulas here because you're going to use the level and trend of time period 20, and it's, as you copy it down, you got to multiply trend by 2 or 3 or 4. All right, and you can go ahead and use analytical solver. You can go ahead and minimize your mean squared error using alpha and beta. Make sure they are between 0 and 1. Run it, and you get it's using 11%, about 12% of alpha, and almost 100% of beta. And here is what we have. And it's, if you notice, my LCL and UCL are slightly off, so I need to move this up. And this one, excuse me. And so here we go. Now it's correct. So this is our forecast and our confidence levels. Okay, so let's then, as we've seen, we saw the actual predicted sales based on the forecast. And our next lecture, we're going to talk about how we are using double moving average during COVID to find trends. So let's get some COVID data, and we'll look at how you can minimize the noise and fluctuations and actually use double moving average here and figure out the trend.